An order paper question response came back in the Canadian House of Commons last week on the data, or lack thereof, used to justify the authorization of the novel COVID-19 injections for children aged 17 and under. The formal legislative inquiry came from Conservative MP Ted Falk, probing Health Canada's decision to inject children with this platform and what risk-benefit analysis was conducted before they did it. He asked the agency what serious adverse events, called SAEs, Pfizer and BioNTech disclosed to them before authorization for 12 to 15-year-olds, whether or not the Public Health Agency of Canada, the National Advisory Committee on Immunization, called NACI, or Health Canada became aware of additional adverse events since authorization, and if so, which ones, when were they discovered, and how was this information communicated out to the public. Falk then specifically brings up the case of Pfizer clinical trial participant Maddie DeGarry, who partook in Pfizer's phase 3 clinical trials at Cincinnati Children's Hospital in Ohio in the summer of 2020. Within 24 hours of her second dose, Maddie was hospitalized with concerning symptoms, as relayed to me by her mother, as radiating pain from her spine, ice cold and white extremities, and a feeling that her heart was going to come out of her neck. Maddie had been in and out of various hospitalized, was paralyzed, and kept alive through a feeding tube, which, most disturbingly, all of this was covered up, simply recorded as functional abdominal pain by Pfizer. Falk then asked whether or not any of the above-named agencies were aware of Maddie's adverse event and that it had not been properly disclosed during the clinical trial study outcomes. He asked if Health Canada had added her official diagnosis of demyelinating polyneuropathy to their list of severe adverse events, and if it took any action after discovering the lack of proper disclosure of her vaccine injury. He then goes on to inquire about the age-stratified risk-benefit analysis conducted for 12 to 15-year-olds regarding the vaccination at authorization on May 5th, 2021, including the data used for this, where they indicated that the benefits outweighed the risk, and what are the top 10 SAEs identified in that age demographic, and how have they been communicated. He further asks what type and frequency of SAEs would trigger an unfavorable benefits-risk ratio for healthy children versus those with underlying medical conditions, and if any of the organizations, as mentioned earlier, are aware of other jurisdictions that no longer recommend mRNA vaccines in children by the various age demographics that NACI currently does recommend for anyone in Canada aged 6 months and up. Health Canada took 1,500 words to basically skirt the entire ask, repeating their self-validating mantra that the health and safety of Canadians is Health Canada's top priority, and the department exercises stringent regulatory oversight over vaccines. The response states that before a vaccine is approved in Canada, the department conducts a rigorous scientific review of its safety, efficacy, and quality. But if you remember from my previous investigation, Health Canada's review of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for adolescents aged 12 to 15 took less than a month, starting on April 19th and concluding at authorization on May 5th, 2021. Exclusive government documents obtained by me at rebelinvestigates.com shows that the review notes that the vaccine was well tolerated, but it did not confirm safety or effectiveness, and there was no risk-benefit ratio disclosed. According to Pfizer's phase 3 clinical trial data, there were only roughly 2,000 participants, with a mere 1,000 of them receiving the vaccine. Of those 1,000, just 58% had at least 2 months of follow-up after their second dose, meaning claims of safety and efficacy were based on an exceptionally small cohort of 580 children. If you follow the link shared in the response, the regulatory decision summary for the authorization of this injection still nonsensically touts that the efficacy of Pfizer's BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine was 100% in both those with or without prior evidence of COVID infection. That's right, 100% effective at changing the blood test of 580 participants based on a 7-day follow-up.
So what Pfizer did is they had 2,200 or so kids aged from 12 to 15. And what they did was they gave half of them a placebo, so saltwater injection, and they gave the other half the vaccine. They did second dosing. They followed the kids for a couple of months, and then they said, okay, how well did this work? So unfortunately for Pfizer, nobody got COVID in either group. So they couldn't really judge its effectiveness in terms of its efficacy in terms of preventing COVID. So what they did is they looked at antibodies. They looked at antibodies in the people who got a placebo injection, and they looked at antibodies in people who got a Pfizer injection, and they found that the antibody production in the people who got the Pfizer injection was high in all of the cases of the people who had received the product, and that it was not in all of the people who had received the saltwater injection. So that's not standard. Um, in the adult studies, what they did was they looked at people who not only got COVID, but how severe the COVID they got was. So, because I don't think many parents would be interested in getting a medication where they say, well, it's going to change the results of your blood tests. We don't really know if it's going to protect your child from getting COVID, and we don't really know if it's going to protect your child from dying. So what we have is it is 100% effective in changing the results of a blood test. And we think that that relates to its efficacy in terms of preventing death, but we don't know.
Biostatistician Regina Whittiel and many other data devotees have shown that COVID cases were highest after the rollout of the novel injections, proving that these were not at all efficacious in any sense of the word. Shockingly, Health Canada admits that the safety and efficacy profile can never be indiscriminately determined. The assessment of the benefit-risk profile occurs throughout the life cycle of vaccines, it reads, acknowledging that long-term effects and risks cannot be fully captured during clinical trials. The agency discounts Maddie Daguerre's story completely, hiding behind this statement. The Government of Canada is not in a position to comment on cases relating to specific patients. Of course they're not. They list a number of links there about AEFIs, adverse events following immunizations, and I followed them, I checked them all, and none of them mention Maddie's diagnosis of demyelinating polyneuropathy. They mention myocarditis and pericarditis, but link to a page that hasn't been updated since July 16th, 2021, which unscientifically states that the benefits of vaccination include prevention of COVID-19 infection and transmission. Health Canada acknowledges the absence of a specific framework or threshold for determining an unfavorable risk-benefit profile. They state, there is no specific type and frequency of serious adverse events that would automatically result in an unfavorable benefits-risk ratio for an age group or a subgroup of the population. Rather, this determination would be based on a scientific review of the balance of risks and benefits. If the available evidence, including data obtained through surveillance, indicates that the risks outweigh the benefits, Health Canada will take appropriate action. This action may include changes to the conditions of use of a drug, such as contraindicating use for some groups, or complete removal of the drug from the market. Should such action be taken, Health Canada would also communicate the risk to Canadians and healthcare providers. The agency is still clinging to its old safety mantra, concluding with the response, to date, the benefits of these vaccines continue to outweigh their known risks. But what exactly are the benefits, and how does one outweigh the risks when so many are unknown? Given the troubling levels of fragmented DNA contaminants detected in the vials of these injections, experts such as PhD virologist Dr. David Speaker assert that Health Canada has not adequately addressed the associated risks, especially of DNA integration and genetic tampering that could affect generations to come. This is compounded by Health Canada's confirmation of a concerning integration plasmid called the SV40 promoter, often used for driving genetic expression in experimental settings. This has been called inactive by the regulator, of which no regulations exist to adequately safeguard against potential risks. Given the rollout of the novel COVID-19 injection technology, it's important to recognize here that it has never been deployed at a population level on healthy individuals. Existing vaccine regulations for genomic DNA are being inappropriately applied to the modified RNA encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle platform, which could lead to exponential increases in DNA within our cells. Genomics expert Kevin McKernan, who has been at the forefront of the SV40 promoter discovery, is concerned that this could result in heightened risk of things like Alzheimer's, cancer, fertility impairment, and more. Now, before I wrap up this report, let's keep in mind that Health Canada's decision to authorize emergency use injections in May of 2021, despite having over a year of data indicating that children were at higher risk of complications from the flu than from COVID, revealed a chilling disregard for public safety. They relied on parental approval as a measure of evaluation, prioritizing emotions over empirical evidence, effectively greenlighting a product to market with no long-term safety testing based on what they referred to as a limited understanding of the virus. This approach not only undermines scientific integrity, but also endangers the very lives it claims to protect, an admission that raises critical questions about the transparency and reliability of the data used to support vaccine authorization, highlighting the importance of continuous evaluations, fact-finding, and of course, media scrutiny. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Stay up to date on reports just like this at nomoreshots.ca. At that website, you can send a forum email to Federal Minister of Health Mark Holland calling on him to revoke market authorization for these injections. And there you can also sign our petition. Don't miss out and stay informed at nomoreshots.ca.